and it would be also used for marking your attendance. Now, moving on to the lecture of the day. Today's lecture is delivered by Ms. Arya MP, full-time PhD research scholar at St. Aloysius College, Thrissur. She will be speaking on the topic, A Glimpse at Julia Kristeva's Notion of the Abject. During the lecture, the participants may post their queries in the chat box. Over to you, Arya.
Thank you, Anita. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity. Today, we will be having a short lecture about the concept of the abject as described and theorized by Julia Kristeva. So, the order of my presentation will be as follows. We will first have a short description about the theoretician Julia Kristeva. Then we will discuss about her books and particularly the influences Julia Kristeva has had in theorizing about the abject. Then we will deal with the concept of the abject as such. And I will conclude by giving an example from a mainstream Malayalam cinema. So let me share my screen with you and start the presentation. Please wait. Is my presentation visible to you?
Yes, Arya.
Okay, thank you. So we are looking at Julia Kristeva's notion of the abject. First, a glance at the theoretician Julia Kristeva. She is a Bulgarian born French theorist and she has imprinted her signature in a number of fields in with regard to literary theory. She could be thought of as a philosopher, feminist, post-structuralist, psychoanalyst, literary critic, as well as a novelist. And she was part of the Tel Quel group. Now, the Tel Quel was a literary journal which was published from France during the 1960s and 1970s, the heyday of post-structuralist movement. She was part of it, and she has also been associated with a number of literary giants like Barth, Strauss, and Goldman. Presently, she is a professor emerita at Paris Diderot University in France, and some of her major contributions include the semiotic and the symbolic, the abject or abjection. Both of these concepts will be dealt with in today's lecture. She has also contributed certain ideas like intertextuality and chora, both of which are familiar to us. These are some of her major books. Let me tell you that this is like tip of the iceberg. She has published around 100 books, but I have included only a few just to give you a glimpse of the varied arenas in which she has made her imprints. Let me tell you that Desire in Language is about linguistics, Powers of Horror and The Black Sun are about psychoanalysis, Female Genius is about feminism. It is actually an anthology of a series of three books published from 2001 to 4. Teresa, My Love, and The Enchanted Clock are two of her novels. Marriage as a Fine Art is, in fact, an autobiographical essay that she has co authored with her husband, Philip Solers. Philip Solers is also the person, the founding member of Telquel Group that we were talking about earlier. Finally, let me also mention the latest book that Julia Kristeva has brought forth. This is titled Dostoevsky. It is a tribute to the famous Russian writer Fyodor Dostoevsky, and it was published in 2020, which makes her a very contemporary critic and writer. And this book may also be a tribute to the author since we are celebrating the bicentennial year of his birth in 2021. These are certain books written about Kristeva. This is just to give you an idea that not just her works, but about her personality, about her academic oeuvre, so many things that constitute the personal, political, as well as academic life of Kristeva has been written by others as well, ranging from the 1980s to 2020, again making her very contemporary. Now, we are going to look at the text, The Powers of Horror, an essay on abjection. This book was published around 41 years back in 1980. It was originally published in French and translated 2 years later into English. And let us go into the content a little later. Now, for the time being, as an introduction to the book, uh, we need to understand that this is a book about psychoanalysis, and this book about abjection is heavily influenced by the theories of Freud and Lacan. The book is divided into 11 chapters, but we will be looking only at the first chapter, which is titled Approaching Abjection. And this book has been very useful and a foundational book with regard to a number of disciplines, among which horror film scholarship ranks first. Horror film is studies about horror film, particularly the Western horror film, is highly indebted to Julia Kristeva's Powers of Horror, an essay on abjection. Now, we are looking at the etymology of the word abject. It is from abjectus, which is a past participle of the Latin word abicere, meaning to cast off or reject. Now, in the present dictionary meaning of English, we find abject as an adjective that indicates a very servile, a menial position, a very extreme position in a negative sense. For instance, when you say somebody is living in abject poverty, you mean to say that somebody is living in extreme poverty, in a very servile situation. Okay, I hope you understand. Now we are moving on to the major influences that Kristeva, as a theorist, has had on theorizing about the abject. The first one is The Uncanny, a series of essays by Sigmund Freud, published as early as in 1919. Now, what do we generally call the uncanny? Or what is the meaning of the word uncanny? It is a mysterious experience, a thing, a person, a situation in which we are caught, which makes us very uncomfortable, okay, which is disturbing to us. We do not want to be in that situation, but we are caught in such a situation. It need not be a situation we face a particular person or a thing, etc. If I could give you a very commonplace example, if you have watched the film called Junior Mandrake in Malayalam, there is a bronze statue that brings downfall to every person who possesses that statue. So that statue becomes an uncanny thing. Okay, I hope you understand. Now, Freud connects the concept of uncanny to the return of the repressed. He says that every child has certain experiences while he or she passes through the phase of childhood, and these uneasy experiences get repressed in our subconscious mind, and at some point in life, when certain triggers are pulled, the repressed returns to haunt us. That is particularly things that are better hidden in our memory. We wish that they were hidden in our memory, but they come to haunt us. So, such ideas are comprise the concept of the uncanny as given by Sigmund Freud. This is kind of a very simplistic definition, but the concept is more elaborate if we read the essays by Freud. Now, the second influence Kristeva has had in theorizing about the abject is Lacan's three stages of human psychosexual development. We have all learned this in psychoanalysis. To be very precise, the imaginary stage is the first, around the first 6 months of a human baby, when the baby thinks of itself as a continuation of the mother's body. Then, slowly, after 6 months, it starts entering the mirror stage where the baby looks in the mirror and understands that I am a different self and my mother is another. Please note the similarities between mother and other, both the words. Okay, so the first other that the baby recognizes is its own mother. And later, the baby moves into the symbolic stage, maybe after 1 year or so. It moves to the symbolic stage where the baby starts speaking. And language is considered as the initial stage to the law of the father or the masculine symbolic order, where the baby rejects its mother and enters into the father's universe, where it has definite distinctions like male, female, or black and white, etc.
Excuse me, Arya. All the participants are kindly requested to mute their microphones. Seems like there is a disturbance in between.
Mira, can you just mute your mic? Hello, Mira, can you hear me?
Excuse me, can the co-host mute her for the time being?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, is it clear? Can I continue?
Yes, Arya. Yes,
Yes.
Okay, okay. So, influenced by Freud's concept of the uncanny and Lacan's stages of human psychosexual development, Kristeva again divides the psychosexual development into two stages. One is the semiotic stage, and the second is the symbolic stage. I'm not explaining in detail about each of these stages because it is similar to Lacan's three stages. The only difference is that Kristeva's semiotic stage incorporates Lacan's imaginary stage, where the baby thinks of itself as an undifferentiated image of the mother. Again, this is closely tied with the instinctual realm or the feminine realm because the constant presence next to the baby is the mother. Then, in the symbolic stage, according to Julia Kristeva, which is again an incorporation of the mirror and the symbolic stages of Lacan, we can see that language develops, the child becomes the speaking subject, it begins to distinguish between the self and the other, and it enters into the world of binaries and established power structures. It builds a sense of identity and it rejects the mother. Okay, now what is abjection? This is not a definition given by Kristeva. Kristeva, by the way, is not very easy to read. This is a definition that I just derived from what we learned right now. So, abjection is this process of rejecting or casting off this maternal world, initial maternal world, where there are undistinguished or unrepressed desires, where there is no morality, there are no power structures. All these is rejected by a human child in order to enter the masculine symbolic order and embrace language. And through language, this baby is introduced to culture, meaning, and society. In short, into the masculine symbolic order. So the first abject becomes the mother and all that she signifies in the form of unrestricted love and unrepressed desires. Now, where does Kristeva differ from Lacan? It is in the last point given on the slide. Kristeva says that even though the subject means the baby who has now acquired subjecthood, okay, the subject enters the symbolic, it still oscillates between the semiotic and the symbolic. It always yearns to go back to that stage of completeness that it feels with its mother. But the superego, or the rules that govern the symbolic, are constantly holding back this subject from going back or enjoying that semiotic pre-Oedipal stage. Okay, now in the first chapter, approaching abjection, uh, Kristeva begins to talk about what the abject is. She defines it in the first subtitle as neither subject nor object. Okay, everything when we are initiated into the masculine symbolic order, we know, as we saw earlier, we know the rigid boundaries or rigid binaries that define the power structures. So, where does abject stand? Abject stands somewhere between the subject and the object. And to name and define the abject is not easy. If you ask me what is an abject, I cannot show you one thing and say this is abject. It could be an experience, it could be an emotional state, anything. Uh, for example, I have given the example of Judith Butler's gender performativity. We read in Judith Butler's very famous book, Gender Trouble, that in a heterosexual society, we have the subject, uh, who is the heterosexual man, and the object, who is the heterosexual woman. And being a homosexual in a heterosexual society makes you an abject. I hope you have got the idea. So, this homosexual cannot be included in a man or a woman because of the peculiarities of an individual's sexual interests. So, what happens is the homosexual is deemed as an abject. Okay, somewhere in between the subject and the object. And the abject is always a threat to the established power structures, established symbolic, masculine symbolic order. Okay, she writes, Kristeva has written, it lies there quite close, but it cannot be assimilated. And that makes the abject a threat. It does not get assimilated to the established systems and orders. Again, it goes on. She goes on to write, it is always outside, beyond the set, and does not agree to any of the rules. But what does it do? It does not just lie there and be quiet. From its place of banishment, it does not cease challenging its master. Okay, let me give you this very simple example of the film Manichitra Thazhu. In the beginning of the film, you all must be remembering that very famous humorous sequence when Unnithan, the character of Innocent, goes to examine whether Madambilli has been cleaned. And we will all remember the dialogue which starts, Raghav, oh, it goes like that. And we know that there is something that is uncanny, something abject present there. It could be a monster. A monster could be abject. Why? It is not living, nor is it dead. Okay, you go into that place where you are between two extremes, and that makes you abject, or that makes an experience abject. I hope you understand. This is the next one. To each ego, its object. To each superego, its abject. A very famous statement from the book. We know that it is in the superego that our morality, our ethics, questions that concern our cultural identity are all placed. So these are all challenged by the abject position. Okay, Kristeva gives the very easy example of the skin that is present on top of the milk. We call it palpada. Okay, she says, my parents give me a glass of milk because I am in their desire. But when I see the skin, I feel like retching, I feel like vomiting, and I don't want to consume that milk. So that becomes kind of abject for me, but I am in a trapped situation because my parents would want me to consume it, and otherwise they would become sad. So that is the trapped state of abjection. She also talks about body fluids, filth, dung, excreta, etc., which are kept away from the body so that the body feels safe and civilized and cultured. And she talks about the corpse, which she describes as the most sickening of words. When you go to a house where death has taken place, when certain religious ceremonies are performed on the dead body and it is either burnt or buried according to religion, we know, okay, this is what happens to human beings. Or when we find a dead body in a medical laboratory, we know this is to study anatomy. But if you find a dead body on a lonely road where nobody is present, what would our condition be? What would be our reaction to this particular situation be? Okay, this causes abjection. If you look at most of the Western films, horror films, we could find they make use of the dead body a lot more than what we find in Malayalam horror cinema. A lot of filth and dirt and horror evoking elements are brought with regard to the dead bodies in slasher films, particularly in the Western context. So, looking at the last point in the slide, this is the most concrete definition that is given by Julia Kristeva about the abject. The abject is what disturbs identity, system, order, what does not respect borders, positions, rules, the ambiguous, the in between, the composite. I hope I don't have to explain it more. It is a consolidation of the ideas that we already discussed. Now, the abject is perverse. Okay, it is a conglomeration of perversion. Why? Because it does not follow any of the rules that are generally set by the system. By the generally the masculine symbolic order becomes the system. What does it do? It turns them aside, misleads, corrupts, uses them, takes advantage of them, the better to deny them. The abject denies all the rules that are set by the symbolic order. There are two forms of abjection generally. The first one is exclusion or taboo. We can find that certain communities or religions prohibit the use of certain food items or certain things in their religious or daily life. There are also, that is called exclusion. You are excluding something, or if you use something that is prohibited, you become the abject or you become prey to the abject. Now, there are and the other form of abjection is transgression. What is transgression? There are certain limits for particular roles, and when you transgress them, when you overstep them, it becomes abjection. I was listening to a funny music video, which was, I think most of you must have listened to it. I just found it 2 or 3 days back, where a boy was singing about the gender roles prescribed. Who said, and he was singing, it was in Malayalam, the song, and he was singing, who said that men should not cry and women are not supposed to go out after 6:30 p.m. Okay, these are all unwritten laws, but these laws do exist, especially in living in Malayali society like Kerala. We will definitely understand what it means to transgress your gender or other class, caste roles and what happens to you. So all these becomes the abject. And the next point talks about how do we, in spite of knowing that abjection or abject is not a place to be inhabiting, we are still going into these places or spaces of abjection because we are fascinated by it. Why do we go to watch a horror film? You know that you are going to get afraid, but still you go because we want to experience that adrenaline rush. And we are fascinated by the concept of being terrorized within a limited environment of the theater. Okay, so the victims of the abject are its fascinated victims, most of them. And how do we prevent? I'm coming to the conclusion of the essay. How do we prevent ourselves from being abjected? Okay, it does not mean that abject is a very bad thing or a very good thing. She is just saying that every culture thrives on abjection. There is something or some people or some event or some experiences that are considered abject for a culture to survive. Only if we keep them away do we have a good life, or that is what generally the power structures, religions, etc. teach us. So, how do we keep the abject at bay? By an unshakable adherence to prohibition and law. And she goes on to talk about religion, morality, and law, which are three instances of what keeps us away, what keeps the abject at bay. Okay. If you take the history of all the religions, we could find that purifying the abject or purifying a victim who has been terrorized or in the grapple of the abject becomes one of the major incidents, events that mark every religion. Take the instance of horror films. We could see how does a typical horror film end. There will be a religious authority, especially a masculine authority, who comes to perform the exorcism and oust the abject and maybe make the woman normal. Okay, I'm just giving an example. It could be any. Okay, so and not just religion. Kristeva concludes by saying this is the same thing that is performed by art. Art gives you a sense of catharsis. We were talking about how you go into a theater to consciously experience horror and terror. What happens at the end is that we know that this monster who is present within the screen is not going to come and haunt us. We know that this will be taken care of in the film itself and we can walk out free. So, that limited experience of the theater gives us this concept of the safety of experiencing the abject. We are fascinated by it, but definitely we do not want to experience it in general. So, in our real life, so we experience it. We find ways to experience it through horror fiction, gothic novels, or the horror film. Okay, and Kristeva also makes a very detailed analysis of certain writers who have dealt with the concept of the abject. Dostoevsky, Proust, Joyce, Borges, and Artaud being some of them. I am not venturing into that section. We are coming to the closure of the lecture. So, can I explain the example as well, or should I stop presenting?
Ari, I think you can continue.
Okay, I'll just
Maybe
take.
for 5 more minutes.
Yeah. I'll just wind up with the example.
Okay.
We are looking at a very popular movie from Malayalam horror film. Now, let me also remind you that Julia Kristeva does not talk about the horror film and abject, the presence of the abject in the horror film. This is taken up later by a critic called Barbara Creed and others as well, like Linda Williams. Julia Kristeva generally theorizes about the abject. Now, in Manichitrathazha, before understanding the film, we should think about the cultural context in which it is produced. In the 1990s, particularly the early 1990s, Kerala witnessed its very strong political feminist movement. A lot of classes, marches, etc., were held for the rights of women, for against dowry deaths, rapes, marital rapes, etc. And there was also a lot of women who went from Kerala to other parts of India as well as abroad for higher prospects like higher studies or even job opportunities. Now, this feminist movement in Kerala was opposed by many mainstream movements, particularly those that had masculine ideology entrenched within it. And one of them was Malayalam cinema itself. In Malayalam cinema, this is also a time when, post the Babri Masjid demolition in 1992, we find there is a revival of Hindutva, right-wing Hindutva ideology in the society and as well as in Malayalam cinema, which could be seen as reflected in the alpha male films, which celebrated hyper masculinity. We find a lot of films like Mohanlal's Devasuram, Mammootty's Truth, Suresh Gobi's Egalavyan, etc. These projected men, mostly Brahmin or higher caste Hindu men, feudal lords, who took care of every crisis that happens in the film, and the woman is sidelined into being a mother or an item dancer or just a person to side with the hero. That's it. So during this time, while Malayalam mainstream cinema opposed the feminist movement in its own way of as an art form, we could see that Manichitrathazhu also follows the same lead. There have been a number of studies on Manichitrathazhu, but we are restricting it to analyzing how Ganga becomes the abject. Okay, there are a number of factors. The first one of her being a middle class Nair woman. We will understand why the caste of Nair is important. We will understand it at the end. Now, she is the daughter-in-law in the family. Okay, we understand Marumagal becomes the other in the family, and we see a lot of women in the film, but only Ganga comes from a different family. There is even a scene where Nedumudi Venu talks to Suresh Gopi, saying, "Anya വീടുകളിൽ നിന്ന് വരുന്ന പെൺകുട്ടികൾക്ക് താമസിക്കാൻ പറ്റിയ സ്ഥലമല്ല, ഗംഗ അന്യ വീട്ടിൽ നിന്ന് വരുന്ന കുട്ടിയാണ്." Okay, which already makes her the other, and moreover, she is unlike the other women in the film. She is educated. Okay, she has gone from Kerala to Calcutta to get educated, and after marriage, she has come back. Okay, the 90s woman. She is representative of the 90s woman, and her outlook is very modern. She dresses very fashionably. She is very agentic. Her salwar kameez, her unpinned sari, her hair that is left open, and which terrorizes. If you see the first half of the film, you can find Ganga terrorizes both the characters of Innocent and Ganesh Kumar at least twice in the film. Okay, she is already constructed as the abject due to certain aspects of her modern education, her caste. Caste comes a little later, we will get into it, and her modern outlook. She is an intelligent woman, and we read earlier that fascination is a problem. Okay, we read that most of the victims of the abject are fascinated by the abject. Ganga is fascinated by the legends, already the abject legends that she hears about Nagavalli and Shankaran Thambi, and how their spirits are still haunting the Tekkini. Okay, and her fascination leads to her agency of opening the door, and this opening the door becomes an act of transgression. Okay, you are not supposed to open a door that has been closed by masculine authorities as well as religious authorities. There is a scene where Nedumudi Venu warns Ganga not to open the Tekkini, but she does open it, and this leads to her transgression, and she herself becomes the abject. And there is also a lot of scholarship regarding the marital discord between Nagulan and Ganga. In the first picture given in the slide, you can see Ganga constantly waits for Nagulan to come to bed, but he never does. He is always engaged in his work. He never comes there is no scene of physical intimacy between, or even a romantic dialogue that appears between Ganga and Nagulan. And there have been a number of studies that say that Ganga was a dissatisfied wife, and there are studies that even imagine her as wanting to have an extramarital affair with Mahadevan, whom Nagavalli imagines as the erstwhile Ramanathan. In the second picture, you can find Ganga posing herself, imagining herself as the Nagavalli. Okay, both Nagavalli as well as Ganga are suppressed characters, and both become the abject. Nagavalli becomes the abject post her death in the lore that is carried down forth in the generations, and Ganga becomes the abject because she ventures into prohibited spaces. She overcomes the laws, the prohibitions, and she becomes the abject herself. And in the third picture, we find a series of the very famous Vidamate scene, where you can see gradually the revenge inside Ganga inside Nagavalli comes out, and it is directed at her husband. Okay, the curious comparison between how Nakulan becomes the Karanavar and Mahadevan becomes her lover. Okay, the possibility of an extramarital affair and how this makes his wife an abject. He wants to bring back the abject uh, into his own wife who loves only him. And the final picture is about Sri Devi and Ganga. I think we will leave that out. We will just come to the conclusion. Now, Nagavalli or Ganga, she represents the return of the repressed. The film documents very well that it is the childhood uncanny experiences, the shocks that Ganga receives as a child that is carried over to what makes Ganga the abject in the present. She is very agentic and she is avenging. She is representative of the feminist. All of these ideas that are resisted by the hegemonic patriarchy in Kerala. And how is this purified? It is purified through Dr. Sunny, who is educated in the West, Christian, and thereby, earlier we said Ganga is Nair. So Christian becomes outside, staying outside the casteist framework, and then he is also Western educated, which is credit to him. Then there is Brahmadattan Nambudiripada, played by Tilagan, who again is a Brahmin who is higher in caste, so that the film ends without disturbing the established casteist notions. The Brahmin reigns is superior, and he is apt to tame the Nair woman. And there is Nagulan, the patriarchal authority over Ganga. So, religion, the patriarchal morality, and medicine, or modern medicine, all of these culminate to form the climax, the very famous climax scene of the film, and it becomes the ideal horror film. I thought of playing the climax, but I don't think there is much time. So, let me just put a little idea about how the climax goes. We find that there is Dr. Sunny, then Nagulan, then Brahmadattan Nambudiripada, and so many male aides who help them to control Nagavalli and to execute their plan. There is a homosocial bonding that takes place, and then there is a masculine homosocial bonding. Then there is the presence of the terrified spectators who include the family members as well as the neighbors. This is like a lesson given to the spectators as of what happens when you venture into the abject, or when you invite abject into your life. What happens when you transgress your gender roles? And this is like a lesson. What happens to Ganga, the violence meted out to Ganga's body, is in fact a lesson to the terrified spectators. In the denouement, we find that Ganga is hypnotized, and we find Mohanlal asking Shobhana, "What is your name?" And she says Ganga, and he asks her, "Muruvan Barayu," and she tells Ganga Nagulin. She becomes Nagulins, and she wants to go back to Calcutta along with Nagulin, which is also a hint at the joint family being a problem. And the 90s was a time of the peak time of the formation of nuclear families. So Ganga goes with Nagulin to escape into a world where she can be the submissive, heteronormative wife who loves only Nagulin and who does not have any prospects in her life, including professional prospects. And Sri Devi, okay, we are just overlooking Sri Devi's role. Let it be there. And the commercial success and the cult status enjoyed by Manichitra Thala in the spectator's psyche, it also talks to us about the entrenched patriarchal notions that are still followed in the cultural psyche of Kerala. So this is, I think, a very simple example that I could give of the very complex concept of the abject. So I hope you have understood, and thank you.
Thank you, Arya. That is definitely a comprehensive, well articulated, and profound lecture. Thank you once again. Now we shall move on to the first response by Ms. Sridevi KS, full-time PhD research scholar at St. Lucia's College. Ms. Sridevi.
Yeah, yes, Anita. First of all, Arya, it was such a good and very comprehensive presentation. And the complex concept that is abject, that is very clear for us through your examples through the film. And here I have, it's not a doubt, it's just a question to make sure whether we can apply Kimberly Crenshaw's intersectionality theory to unfold Ganga's identity disorder, or can we just see that is Ganga as an abject, as you said, Ganga as an abject? Can we unfold her abject self as an amalgamation of social, cultural, gender factors? As we see the movie, we can see some social factors. That is, she belongs to a Nair community, and it needs the power of Brahmin, that is the Brahmadatta Nambudripad, to that is to suppress her alter ego, that is that of Nagavalli, and he practices exorcism on her. So the class distinction you can see. So the social factors, it also influences her, and also the religious background she had. Like she born and brought up in her family with her grandmother, and the grandmother always tell her stories when she goes to sleep, and all those characters, as you said, as in Lacan's mirror stage, all those characters create that is a different self, that is her sense of a separate self is created through all those stories. So the religious background also, and as I say, the gender factor, as in Crenshaw's theory, the gender factor, she belongs to the, that is the gendered binary, like Nagulan and Ganga. So as you said, she is in a that is in a four wall or in a very compressed atmosphere, like that is different from she was what in the in her early ages. She has to take permission from him to go everywhere. So, and the alter ego of Nagulan, that is Shankaran Thambi. That character also, the gender binary is also there, which makes her to be the that is the woman figure who wants to suppress the authoritative or patriarchal authority on her. So my question or my doubt is like whether this Kimball Crenshaw's theory can be applied to unfold her character or her abject self.
Yes, actually, I am using Kimberly Crenshaw's theory of intersectionality in my research as well. Uh,
Oh,
this
okay.
this theory, in fact, talks about how there are. Crenshaw, in fact, talks about the black activists, but in general, the theory has been used as a methodology for social research, and the theory states that it is not just one factor that creates marginalization in certain groups of people. For example, if we take a black woman, she is marginalized both on terms of her gender as a woman and her race as a black. So, race and gender intersect to form double marginalization in case of a black woman. Similarly, this could also be applied in case of Ganga, because as we saw earlier, there are several factors that make Ganga the abject. Several factors like her caste, again her urbanity, she comes from Calcutta, then she also is educated, her modernity, her education. These are all factors, and her sexuality. Obviously, there is the gender idea, and her caste and other factors follow. So, definitely, I think a theory of intersectionality is played out in Ganga, only that it is in the cultural context of Kerala, away from the black activist location. I think it definitely plays a role
Oh,
in the
okay.
subject.
Okay, it's clear, Arya. Thank you.
Thank you, Arya. Um, Now we shall move on to the second response by Ms. Anju VR, full-time research scholar and junior research fellow at St. Aloysius College, Thrissur.
Thank you, Anita. Arya, that was a really nice presentation, really what we want with such a popular Malayalam film, Manchikarathal. I hope almost everyone of us have seen it, have watched it multiple times. Yeah, I was also wondering how, as literary students or research scholars, we have lost our ability to sit back, relax, and watch a movie instead of reading it from multiple critical angles. I would like to make my own observation uh, in this regard. Like, in contrast to the humanistic discourses, which viewed agency as control or a feature of being sane, post-structuralist elaborates agency as something that involves or contributes to the construction of oneself or subjectivity. But still, the idea of sanity or being sane linked to it. The idea of agency remained as a masculine or elitist discourse. It was also connected to moral rightness and thus linked to power. Like we see that these dominant patriarchal discourses always considered women or children as agentless and thus powerless to mold their self, and they always prescribe certain modes of subjectivity or modes of being for such agentless people, I mean categories like women or children or even homosexuals. And we see that everyone who makes a transgression is considered as mad or insane, or branded as insane. And here also we see how Ganga was branded as a mad woman. And even later we also see the case of Sridevi also, the plight of Sridevi, who was forced into a marriage, and how Chauva Dosham has ruined her marital life. And she was also considered as the other in her house, in her own household. Like, hence it was pretty easy for the patriarchs in her family to ascribe madness onto her. In the starting, we see that it was everyone suspects Sridevi as the woman, as Madamballile Manuvarudi. Okay, coming back to Ganam, we see that madness was inscribed onto her as a punishment to her deeds because she transgressed the gender roles. She transgressed the roles by accessing the prohibited room or the tekini. തെക്കിനിയിലേക്ക് കടക്കുന്നതോടുകൂടെ അങ്ങനെയാണ് ഇതിൽ പറയുന്നത്. And even Ganga is also prevented from accessing her memory twice in her life. Like she or herself is subjected to reconstruction by patriarchs of the family, her father during her childhood by taking her to Calcutta from her ancestral home, and later by her husband and relatives after her entry into Madambally. We also see that, as Arya said, the dialogue of Nedumudi Venu, I mean the character of Nedumudi Venu, Ganga Anya Veetile Kuttiyana. He says Kuttiyana, which means Ganga as a girl from another family, which is also an attempt to infantilize her and also to subjugate her by trivializing her views. It is another attempt to remove agency from her by infantilizing her, calling herself as a girl from, as a girl, in double quotes, a girl from another family. And we also see Nagavali, who has a similar plight, like Ganga, which makes her or which underscores the empathy that Ganga feels towards Nagavali. Okay, another point that I feel connected to this was how agency, gender, and space is connected. How Dr. Sanni elaborates on the dynamics of her mental state with regard to shift or change in her place of residence. മുത്തശ്ശിയോടൊപ്പം കഥകൾ കേട്ട് വളർന്നിരുന്ന ഒരാൾ പിന്നീട് അവർ കൽക്കട്ട നഗരത്തിന്റെ പുത്രിയായി. ഹൗ ഹർ മെന്റൽ സ്റ്റേറ്റ്, ആ ഒരു ട്രാൻസിഷൻ പറയുന്നത് അങ്ങനെയാണ്. ലൈക്ക് ഫ്രം ട്രഡീഷണൽ ലാൻഡ്സ്കേപ്പ് ടു urban ലാൻഡ്സ്കേപ്പ്, ആ ഒരു അങ്ങനെയാണ് അവളുടെ വ്യത്യാസം വരുന്നത് എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. ഹൗ മോഡേൺ ലൈഫ് സ്റ്റൈൽ has helped her overcome her delusions. Ganga repeats the same narrative, in fact follows the same by deciding to return to Calcutta after the Nagavalli episode, so that she can prove her affection towards Nagulan, her benevolent husband, caretaker. എനിക്ക് നകുലേട്ടന്റെ മാത്രമാവണം, അതിന് കൽക്കട്ട തന്നെയാണ് നല്ലത് എന്ന് പറയുമ്പം ആ ഒരു ലാൻഡ്സ്കേപ്പിലോട്ട് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ആ ഒരു urban സെറ്റിങ്ങിലോട്ട്, സ്പേസിലോട്ട് ഹൗ ഈ ഒരു ഏജൻസിയും ജനറൊക്കെ ലിങ്ക് ചെയ്ത് വെക്കുകയാണ്. She is always indebted towards him, even though she is portrayed as a modern woman. Again, this contradictory aspect in Ganga. She is portrayed as a modern woman, but a woman who is always haunted by the nostalgic memories. Ganga finds her individual space in Madambili house, her attachment to the room where she could reclaim her past that was lost to her by the treatment. So my point was like, how madness and this kind of infantilizing is also used as a method to, or as a tool to control the self or subjectivity of Ganga. I think that was another dimension to what Arya has just presented. Yeah, that's, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Anju. Now, the floor is open for discussion, questions, comments from the part of the participants. If you have any queries or comments, you can either post it in the chat box or you can unmute yourself and speak.
Shall I just ask one question? It's very interesting, and as Anju has pointed out, I would like to know what our culture, or this in the diegesis of Manichitrathal consider as abject. That is, usually we talk about nuclear family being denigrated or idealized, both. But then here, what exactly is the abject there? Is nuclear family the abject or the joint family? Is urban the abject or the rural setting at the abject? Because usually, again, we have this Malayalam melodramatic sort of a viewpoint where we always idolize the joint family, we always idolize the rural background in the mainstream films. But here, what is the abject? And what does it say about the 1990s culture of Kerala and about the diegesis in the film? And even in the end of the film, we find the Sunny. Our hope, the hope that is given to the audience is that one day Sunny will come there and save Sridevi from the joint family rural setup. Sunny is the one who had gone to the US and he is a roaming fellow who might travel from one metro to another. And US is the ultimate metro. So Sunny is the one who might save Sridevi from that joint family rural background to the urban nuclear family setup, again patriarchal. So what exactly is the abject in the 1990s Kerala as projected through this film? Okay, that is an observation come question.
Ma'am, can I answer?
Yes. Thank you for answering.
Yeah, well, I think that whether the rural background or the urban background is the abject will depend on the person who imagines it. Let me give an example. When there are certain abject happenings in the Madambili Taravadu, Nedumudi Venu in a dialogue to Suresh Gopi tells him, താനും തൻ്റെ ആ പരിഷ്കാരി പെണ്ണും കൂടെ കാണിച്ചു കൂട്ടിയതിൻ്റെ ഫലമാണ് ഇപ്പോൾ എല്ലാവരും അനുഭവിക്കുന്നത്. സോ ഹി ബ്ലെയിംസ് ഇറ്റ് ഓൺ ഗംഗ, who has come from a modern background to create problems in an otherwise very calm and serene rural background. So I think according to Nedumudi Venu, the I'm actually referring to the character Thambi, the urban space becomes the object. But at the end, as Anju mentioned, Ganga wants to go back to Calcutta and belong there. And according to her, it might be this short stay in the rural background which has brought her in contact with the abject, with the uncanny, with which she otherwise wouldn't want to connect. So for Ganga, the rural background might be the abject. And when we consider 1990s Kerala, I think we should also consider this generation gap of how the older generation would want to remain in that idyllic rural setting, while we cannot overlook the sudden urbanization that is happening in 90s Kerala with the arrival of neoliberalism and globalization and liberalization and things like that. So the younger generations who are a little open-minded towards change, and maybe people who wanted to get out of orthodox thinking in terms of the generation gap, for them maybe the rural background could be thought of as abject, or that is what I felt. I hope I have.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Good.
Questions from the scholars or other participants or comments? Betsy ma'am, in case we do not have any queries, should we move on?
Yes.
Do we have time for a small literary quiz?
It's already 8.
8:40, okay.
So maybe we can postpone the quiz to the next time, I
Okay.
think.
Sure, ma'am.
No point in delaying the whole thing.
Okay. So, if there are no other, yes, Ms. Anshu? No, she doesn't have anything to speak. Okay, if we do not have any more queries, shall we call it a day?
Before winding up, ഒരു കാര്യം പറയാനുണ്ട്. I have joined as GDS under the Changanasheri subdivision of post office on last Monday. I am trying to convert my full-time research scholar to part-time research join. I just want to share my happiness with everyone. That's it.
Hearty congratulations, Anju. So happy for you.
Thank you, Miss. Thank you.
Wishing you best wishes, Anshu.
Congratulations, Anju.
Thank you.
And waiting for the next good news too.
Okay. I've also got an extension for 1 year. So my research period ends by 2023 January. 1 year, I got a 1 year extension.
Thank you all for joining the session. I hope you have filled the Google form that was circulated. It will be used also for taking attendance. Thank you all once again. We shall meet on next Thursday. Thank you.